Nigeria has been the hotbed of the most dangerous Islamist activities. Basically, the place where they kill, they massacre Christians with impunity. But to a lot of people that are not Nigerians, especially those that are not even from the African continent, it would sound odd to say that. What about Gaza with all the bombs? What about Ukraine, Russia? And for those who might have a little interest about Africa, what about Sudan? How can you say in Nigeria? The reason is simple. It is because the Islamists in Nigeria had done their homework much earlier before the massacres began. And that is the reason why you hear stories like farmer had a clash, climate change induced crisis, and all of that. So somebody goes to a community, Islamists go to Christian communities, they rape their women, they kill people, they massacre as many as they can, babies, women, pregnant women, old men, destroy their crops. In communities where they have, collectively put their grains together, they burn it down. There are places where they have attacked and just caged families in the room and set them on fire and burnt them alive. All of these things go under the radar. As a matter of fact, some state governors will even deny the existence of IDP camps in their states. This is how far it has gone to cover up the genocide. But actually, is it the first time that somebody is referring to what's happening in Nigeria as a genocide? The answer is no.
That Boko Haram target primarily Christian communities.
For as long as the pattern became consistent, the Christians knew it was a genocide. We've cried about it. Independent organizations have cried about it. But what exactly is the difference now? I mean, the government trying to cover up a genocide, trying to deny a genocide. The same call that people have been making for almost 2 decades. What basically is the difference? The difference is simple. It is because a senator in the United States of America or the Americans have decided to pick interest in it. But then why should I bother anybody if an American senator picks interest in it? It's simply because there is a tendency of putting Nigeria back to the CPC list. But is that all? No. I believe the bill also seeks to hold certain people to account. And in the words of Senator Ted Cruz, he says, Nigerian officials who sponsor or who are behind these atrocities. And that basically is the craze. The reason is because whatever it is that is happening is being sponsored by people who are government officials. But then why should the Muslim be excited because the notion of a Christian genocide has been debunked? Well, possibly it's simply because the co-sponsors of these massacres are Muslims. Or they are not just Muslims, they are possibly their politicians, they are possibly some of their clerics, and they are possibly some of their key players in government. Otherwise, what would be my interest in denying that a certain form of criminality is being meted against another individual? So badly that I would go as far as proving that it also happens to me, so ignore what he's saying. I always thought that if someone said it's a Christian genocide, somebody would say, okay, whatever it is you're identifying as a Christian genocide also happens to us. So thank God, come in and let's deal with the criminals. But it does look as if by whatever means necessary, the sponsors of this genocide want to stay below the radar. And the only way they can achieve that is by completely denying the fact that it's a genocide. So they just prove to the world that it's just crisis like any other one and nothing is happening. And then there are so many willing, hungry Christians who intend to be the faces. Obviously, they can't come out directly to do it. So from the religious leaders that are saying, shut down social media, because basically the mainstream media would not even have, portrayed the truth of what's been happening in terms of the numbers, in terms of the killings. Without the social media, most people living in Nigeria would not know what has been happening in the Middle Belt. It is a Christian genocide. It is a Christian genocide. If the Americans would wake up tomorrow and say it is not, it still doesn't change the fact that it is a Christian genocide. And we all look forward to not just seeing the end to it, but to seeing the fact that those criminals in government that are sponsoring these killings, that are sustaining these killers in Nigeria, are brought to light and that they face the full weight of the law. There are certain things we could play politics with, but not the blood of children, not the blood of pregnant women, not the blood of old men, not the blood of innocent people. and most certainly not the blood of Christians.
Wow. So, what an incredibly powerful and moving speech by Zariyi Yusuf. I don't know if I pronounced that properly, but we'll find out in a moment. Thank you all for joining me. As you know, yesterday I spoke about the Nigerian genocide and its link to Islamic terrorism in the Middle East. I demonstrated that there is a direct influence from Islamic organizations like the Islamic regime, which is occupying my country of Iran, and of course the Muslim Brotherhood. And what we're seeing in Nigeria happening right now is essentially the Islamist playbook for the last 1400 years. And I know that as an Iranian, seeing what's happening in Nigeria right now, it kind of hits close to home for me because that's pretty much what was happening in Iran. Not a genocide to that extent. It certainly wasn't a genocide, but a lot of people were murdered before the Islamists were able to take control of Iran, and then in 1979 turned Iran into a brutal Islamic dictatorship. And so we're sort of seeing similar signs right now. And it's very frustrating and it's very frightening to see all of the denial. But I have brought someone here, a special guest, and I'm more than happy to introduce him. And I'm going to be bringing him up very, very soon. So here we go. If I can do this. Oh, there we go. Zariyi. Wait, how do I pronounce that? Oh, I don't have your voice. I don't have your audio. Oh no, we're having some technical. Oh,
Now,
yeah, I can hear you now. Oh, perfect.
okay, I think
Okay.
it's good even without the headphone, right?
Yes, we can hear you
Okay,
perfectly.
yeah. So you've actually done great with the name. It's Zariyi Yusuf. That's my name. So yeah, so I
Zariyi
think
Yusuf.
I've
Well,
yeah,
thank you.
that's right. So I'll give
Thank you
you
so much for
yes, I'll give
joining,
you
and I
yeah.
really appreciate that. I know it's such a difficult time for you and for Nigerians. So, um, can you please, before we begin, maybe talk a little bit? First of all, how much time do we have so I know how long I can keep you here? Because I know you're incredibly busy.
Well, yeah, I think we have from now till say 6 p.m.
Perfect. Okay, that's perfect.
All right.
So if you could maybe give a little bit of a background, who you are, um, what your knowledge is, and why you're so outspoken right now about what's happening in Nigeria.
Well, like I said earlier, my name is Zariyi Yusuf. Um, of course, I was born in a Christian family. I grew up in a place where, even from childhood, I had an understanding of difference in matters of religion, ethnicity, and all of that. So that didn't stop us from thriving in that area. But then I had a bit of a different understanding of things much later, possibly from the age of between 8, 9, 10, 11, and 12, when a certain form of violence in my home state began, happening, or maybe when I became conscious of such violence. Maybe before I go into that, I'd say I'm a teacher. I teach in a university, pharmacognosy and phytotherapy. I love justice, so usually I speak on issues that bother injustice. I'm against oppression of people, all kinds of people. I do humanitarian work, especially in the Middle Belt region of Nigeria, where there are attacks. We try as much as possible to see whatever resources we have, however we could reach out to people, however we could encourage them, pray with them, and then how much we could get their voices heard, outside to other states, to international communities, and get people like you talk about it. Now, growing up, I realized the violence. It's a state called Kaduna. Okay, maybe you might not have focused on it, but it was the ground on which what is presently unfolding in the country was tested.
And where would it
Now,
be? So on this map here, so there's a map of Nigeria there. Where would it be roughly?
yeah. Well, it's a part of it's the southernmost part of it's part of the central region of Nigeria.
Okay.
Yes,
Is that what's called the Middle Belt?
that's right. It falls in the middle belt. That's right. Yes. Now, it's a state that has it's basically a prototype of the Nigerian state in terms of the diversity of religious and ethnic groups, where debatably they'd say it's a 50-50 relationship between in terms of population between the Christians and the Muslims. But one striking feature in those early years in the 80s and early 90s was it was quite cosmopolitan. So from the northern part of the state to the southern part of the state, you had a mixture of people living together. But then preachers came up and began talking about how certain people would have to be in charge of the state. A typical example is that at some point there was a cleric that ensured that as far as key positions were concerned in government, it had to be the Muslims. There was also that scenario where then it was the military junta, it wasn't a democracy like it is now. So it was ensured that unless you were a Muslim, nobody was made to head that state, even as a military officer. So that sort of, but the Christians didn't really bother at the time, but that sort of began to.
So it was like this Islamist creep, right? Like it was
Yeah. So it kept coming in gently, but then it was strictly focused in Kaduna. It was just the hotbed of violence. So there were religious crises and all of that. Well, the peak of it that it would introduce what's basically happening was this present political dispensation where at some point a Christian emerged as the governor. That was in 2011. A lot of violence followed. The violence came out as if it was just political. Say maybe the supporters of one candidate are not happy about the fact that the other candidate won, but then it metamorphosed into a religious crisis where Christians, were targeted, were killed. Okay, the president was a Christian and the governor of the state was a Christian. So it looked as if the Christians did something and overthrew, and took power and all of that. So that violence went on and ended. Now, what I said would be an introduction of what's currently happening was an audio tape that came out at the time. And in that audio, it was spoken in Hausa language. Somebody came out and said, "We shall kill this governor who's an infidel. We shall throw bombs in your church while you're worshiping. We shall come with guns. We will kill your daughters. We will rape them. We will kill your villages, and all of that." So that audio kept going around just maybe a week or two after that violence, after that post-election violence. Now, of course, it was dismissed by the government and the DSS that people should ignore that he's just trying to incite fear and violence and all of that. But I want to assure you that there was not a single threat on that audio that was not carried out. Somehow the governor died in an aeroplane, in a helicopter crashed.
Wow.
He didn't really live out his tenure, so he went somewhere and then something happened. We were in church, we were at home when we had people chanting, celebrating. We were more like, wait, what's the celebration about? And we had stories that Sir Patrick Yakowa died in a helicopter crash. Of course.
And something that's very typical of this Islamist ideology where they celebrate death. I mean, I still remember, right. I still remember, September 11, 2001, when World Trade Center towers were attacked, there were like Islamists who were celebrating. I mean, people in Gaza were celebrating, right? Like the so-called Palestinians were celebrating the death of the infidels, right? It's like this common theme of Islamic terrorism where even if they might not be responsible for it, it seems like in this case they were, but even those who had nothing to do with it are celebrating the death of infidels, which is a horrific thing.
Yeah, so that celebration went on and we found out it was the Christian governor or the infidel governor died in a helicopter crash. Now, once that happened, what followed afterwards were a series of bomb explosions in churches. There was it was as if every Sunday you would have 2-3 churches where there were explosions. My church where I worshipped, worshipped then in Zaria, in the northern part of the state, there was a Sunday, people were in church and somebody just drove in with a car. It had a bomb. Thankfully, the gate, the entrance gate was made of iron, but the strength of the explosion still got somebody killed and, wounded a lot of people. The roof of the church came down on people and all of that. So that violence went on and on. So that the normal urban conflicts where people from this community dominated by Muslims and this community dominated by Christians were up against each other, it sort of died down in the urban centers, and then the bombings came in. The bombings after a while stopped, okay? And it looked as if, okay, now we could live in peace. But then something happened. All of a sudden, you are at home and then your grandmother calls and said, we don't really understand. Some people came and they killed people and left. So that was when the story of unknown gunmen began. Okay, but people who knew exactly what was happening said, no, this is not unknown gunmen. These are people we know. Okay, so probably the whole idea, the whole thing has metamorphosed into something else. Then we had a governor who felt that violence in 2011 gave a certain justification for the Fulani militia to take some form of vengeance. So he went as far as looking for them in places like Chad, places like Mali and all of that. He said he looked for them in those countries to compensate them and plead with them to not kill the Christians in the state. So, I mean, that didn't really make sense. Logically, he was on national TV making that, those statements as at the time. You would think that payment would make things subside, but it didn't. So in Kaduna State, what you see happening on the plateau, in Benue, it happened. But as at the time, the government was fully in charge of what was going on, such that each time you cried out about what was happening, there was a tendency of being arrested when you talked about being killed. There was a tendency of being silenced. And then, the narrative the government had, they had the media, they had international connections. So nothing looked like a genocide. People kept dying, people kept being buried, communities kept getting sacked. Priests, Catholic priests especially, they get kidnapped, some end up getting released, some, they collect the money and they kill them. And so it kept thriving in Kaduna State, but then nobody believed anybody, simply because we didn't.
So I just saw an article about that. I shared it here. So this is from September 24. So, about a month ago, and it says Christian genocide feared in Nigeria, murdered priest, latest in long list of offenses against church. Nigerian father Matthew Aya is pictured in an undated photograph. He was killed September 19, 2025, as he was returning to his parish of St. Charles in Iha Ndiagu in Enugu State, Nigeria.
Yeah, Enugu State, that's right. Yep.
So this is, so this is something that's typical, this, which is horrific, but I mean, so this has been going on for a while where Christians are being targeted.
It's been going on for a while. And just to chip in a little thing here, when Boko Haram started, the terrorist group Boko Haram, when it began, although they made it clear to the people that their mission was to put an end to the secular constitution of the Federal Republic of Nigeria and bring in the full implementation of Sharia, have a sort of a caliphate. Most of the politicians in the north kept giving a different narrative. An instance, they would say, but no, actually they are just a group of young people who don't have jobs, suffering from economic hardships, and they took to violence. So possibly if the government made the economy better, they would stop. But the group has made it clear to the country, this is what we are out for. So it does look as if
which
right
group
from
is
the onset,
this?
Sorry?
Which group are you talking
That
about?
Boko Haram.
Boko Haram, right? The terrorist group, right? They're a terrorist group.
Yeah. That
They're
was basically
the ones
how
who
it started.
kidnapped the Nigerian schoolgirls 10 years ago.
Yeah, that's right. The Chibok girls.
Yeah.
They did that. So I'm trying to give you an idea that right from the onset, the killings, the emergence of the terrorist group, there were powerful politicians who were spinning out a different kind of narrative. The terrorist group are carrying out a religious war, and the politicians are telling the world it's just economics. They are just poor, they are just agitated, that there are no jobs, the economy is bad, and that's just what they are doing. So it kept on going. And when the early killings of Christians began, I remember funny stories like they kill a pastor and they tell you, no, sometimes some pastors died in bomb blasts. And they will tell you, no, it wasn't a bomb attack in the church. It was possibly a nearby restaurant that, had a gas cylinder that exploded. And it just happened that the pastor's house was nearby. So nobody in the restaurant dies, but the pastor dies. Something happened in Kano where somebody went with bomb and blew up a Christian school. It happened, I think, a couple of years ago. And such were the stories. They said, no, it wasn't an attack in the school. It was a nearby restaurant that had, a gas cylinder that exploded. So it doesn't add up. You keep wondering, why is the government, or why are certain offices in the government interested in always spinning out a contrary narrative to what exactly is happening? So this is basically where we are coming from. And then just to give you a background of why there is a clear case of a genocide, but then it looks as if the state is determined to say otherwise.
So why is it then? So I want to move forward a little bit now. So thank you for giving us sort of the history there and leading up to it. So why is the current government pretending like there's not a genocide? I mean, I've heard a few things, but because I'm not familiar with the, internal Nigerian politics, it's difficult to kind of sort it out. But, I've heard, various things, including like the current government is like majority Muslim. And so they want to deny it, or maybe they have financial ties to some of these groups. I mean, we just don't know. So I was hoping you could maybe give us a little bit of insight into why the current Nigerian government is denying that Christians are being genocided.
Okay, first of all, I will take you back to 2015 when president that was in power, came in before this one. After the election, what basically started happening, one of the things they thrived upon to get into power was that the previous government that was led by a Christian, that it didn't fight terrorism well, or that it was using the war against terrorism to depopulate the northern Muslims. As a matter of fact, the president that came in 2015 did say that the war against Boko Haram was a war against the north, because they felt it was unfair to the north to basically launch such an offensive against Boko Haram. Now, not long after the government came in,
so Boko Haram, though, Boko Haram is an Islamist militant group, right? I mean, they're basically a terrorist group that has sort of taken over northern Nigeria.
That's right, yeah. They were localized in the northeastern part of the country, particularly in a state called Borno State. And they operated Borno, some parts of Yobe, and then, extended to different parts that were just along, the northeastern part. Now, prior to the 2015 election, there were rumors that were much later confirmed by certain other politicians who granted interviews on national
TV. Just another quick question. Is Boko Haram designated by the Nigerian government as a terrorist organization? Because the United States does designate Boko Haram. Okay, so Boko Haram is recognized as a terrorist organization.
Yes, it was designated by the government that was before 2015, before the APC regime came. Yes. And a couple of times I've argued that based on how some of the politicians opposed the war against Boko Haram, I doubt if they would have been proscribed if they had not been proscribed much earlier. Just pretty much the way you have the Fulani Islamist militia in the Middle Belt being referred to as bandits and kidnappers and unknown
instead of terrorists, right?
Yeah. So once the government came in, we started hearing stories such as actually these were mercenaries, the Islamists were brought into the country in the event that the then president wins the election or possibly refuses to hand over power, they would make the country ungovernable. Those were the stories. And they are not coming from me. They are not coming from people who just went to bed and woke up. We had a former deputy governor of the Central Bank of Nigeria. He once served that made an interview and mentioned how these things happen. Unfortunately, not long after that, something happened and he died. But then we have top military officers in intelligence. One particularly granted an interview and explained why some people felt, okay, we're opening our borders. They will flood into the country. If this infidel does not give us power, we make governorship difficult for him. after all, it is our estate. So you could come in and then you could take the country as plunder, you know. So once they came into power, what happened was, while people thought that, especially the United States, kept funding, kept training with the thought that it would kill terrorism, but we now discovered that that Boko Haram terrorist group, proliferations began from Boko Haram to ISWAP, you know, the Islamic State of West African province, to Lakurawa of late, Mahmouda, and then a new one that just sprang up down, you know, in the north central part of the country and all of that. So they began springing up. And then the activities of Boko Haram in the north central part of the country began getting replicated, especially in the north central part of the country. While in the northeastern part of the country, they targeted pastors, they killed imams as well, who were opposed to their ideology. So that basically is one of the things people should clear, because an Islamist kills a Muslim, then it looks as if he kills him the same way he kills a Christian. It's simply because he feels you should take sides with me and you are preaching against what I'm doing. So they do that, not far from what Hamas was doing right after, you know, the peace deal with So typically they did that. So they flooded.
Like Muslims are some of the biggest victims of Islamic terrorism as well, because it's the radicals just killing everyone. But that Muslim on Muslim violence doesn't negate the fact that Christians are being genocided. And I feel like, that's where the Islamists are trying to push the narrative of there's no genocide because Muslims are also being massacred. But it doesn't mean that there's not a genocide happening. It just means that there's multiple issues here.
Yeah. So, and a lot of times you keep wondering, why are you not crying when your fellow Muslims are getting killed? Why are you more interested in shutting down the notion of a Christian genocide? So, having come from that, it did look as if a lot of politicians that formed the government from 2015, who are still playing in the government today, had a lot to do with the flooding into the country of these people, of these elements. And then how they proliferated, how they went into the Middle Belt, and how they began sacking Christian communities. So each time you say, we are bringing the criminals to book, especially talking about who the sponsors are, you will always have this resistance. So somebody would always want to convince you it's either farmer-header clash, it's either climate change-induced crisis, which, of course, an organization like the UN champions that a whole lot, or it's just maybe local members of the community that do it amongst themselves and claim they've been attacked by an outsider. So as to why there is so much, vehemence in denying this by the government of the day, it has a lot to do with, as far as some people have, mentioned, the ties of possibly many players in the government with this Islamist group. That basically is how I understand it. Otherwise, I mean, why would a country deny a genocide of its own citizens? It just doesn't add up. You would think ordinarily a government should, find a way of fighting or killing the criminals, but then you're trying to tell the world that it's not even happening. Why should that be?
I agree with you. And one thing I find is that with a lot of these sort of like Islamist narratives, it's just deny, 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 deny. And in the past, I think they were able to do so successfully because we didn't have social media, we didn't have access to internet, people didn't have cameras everywhere on their phones and elsewhere, so it was very difficult to share the truth. But
and let me interrupt you there, Goldie. When you mentioned social media, a couple of days back, the Sultan of Sokoto, I think that would be either the highest sort of the Islamic leader in the country, did call on the government to gag social media, even though the reason he gave was that people insult people a lot on social media. And I'm just wondering, the coincidence when the world is looking at an age-long genocide in the country, somebody says, clamp
I can tell you,
it didn't. Yeah,
definitely. I was going to say that's not by coincidence, because that's exactly what happens in Iran. Whenever Iranian people are, get really, get close to overthrowing the regime, or they're protesting or showing resistance, the Islamic Republic will shut down the internet. and they'll basically prevent anyone from sharing videos or even like calling the outside world. It's a classic technique of Islamists to shut down social media.
And I think the Sultan also tried educating Nigerians that we don't understand the concept of jihad, that jihad actually has nothing to do with Muslims killing Christians. It just has to do with advancing certain causes, but it has nothing to do with bloodshed and all of that. So I think
that's the lie. Like that's the biggest
so
lie. It's total gaslighting. We all know what jihad means. We've all been victims of jihad, and the fact that they're still trying to push that false narrative is absolutely wild. Absolutely wild. I wanted to share a few videos and get your thoughts on it.
All right.
The first one is, so you mentioned about funding, right? And there's this interview. It's about 2 minutes long. So I just wanted to play this and get your thoughts on what's happening here. Oh, so let me just remove this and then add. Okay. Because I think this goes into some of the funding you were speaking about.
Virginia Congressman Riley Moore joins us now. Congressman, you're urging Secretary of State Rubio to designate Nigeria as a country of particular concern. Okay. What do you really want Trump to do about this?
Well, what we want is for the killings to stop, and it's a systematic campaign of persecution by Islamic terrorist organizations, not just Boko Haram, but IS West Africa, and also the Fulani tribe that lives in that middle band that has been just discriminately targeting Christians and killing them. You saw the numbers that you just put up there. I mean, they are absolutely horrific. Making this a country of particular concern will limit and restrict their security assistance programs with the United States. So we have been training and equipping the Nigerians in the hope that they were going to stop Boko Haram and eliminate them from Nigeria. Well, that's not happening. And I think there is a question of there is collusion in between the current Islamic government in Nigeria and these terrorist organizations that are killing Christians en masse. So what we want is for President Trump to put that designation back into place.
Well, what I don't understand is why there's not more publicity in the United States for what's going on in Nigeria. When you're killing thousands of Christians because they are Christians and they're being killed by Islamic terrorists, I think that's major news here. And I can't understand why it's not.
And it absolutely should be. Just this year alone, Stuart, we've had 7,000 Christians murdered. That's 35 a day are killed in Nigeria just for professing their faith in our Lord and Savior Jesus Christ. We cannot allow this to continue. We cannot.
Well, what did he mean? I just want to repeat this part here. What did he mean when he mentioned the Islamist government of Nigeria? I just want to replay this part.
What I don't understand is why there's not more publicity.
There is a question of there is collusion in between the current Islamic government in Nigeria and these terrorist organizations that are killing Christians en masse. So,
well, Goldie, his utterance would not be far-fetched from the kinds of utterance that certain politicians made prior to, the coming in of this very regime in 2023. Now, I did mention Kaduna earlier on, and I would connect it with that. We had a governor, Nasiru El-Rufai in Kaduna State, who, like I said, went around TV stations gloating about how he looked for them and he paid them to compensate them. And then, he denied, the genocide. He got people arrested who spoke about the killings and all of that. Now, just around the election, there was this Muslim gathering of clerics where he spoke in Hausa language. And he said, in Kaduna State, they were able to have a Muslim governor, a Muslim deputy governor, a Muslim chief of staff, a Muslim commissioner for justice, the key positions. He was able to make them all Muslims, and people were like Allahu Akbar and all of that. And he said, now at the national level, they have produced a Muslim presidency, and they have done their job. exactly how it was in Kaduna. Those were his words. It will be replicated at the national level. And anybody that has an understanding of what was going on underground in Kaduna would understand what likely Christians were going to face at that level. Now, at the presidential level, a lot of people had hoped in a multi-religious and a multicultural, ethnic country. If the president is a Muslim, the vice president would be a Christian. It has been like that.
Mhm.
But the party decided to pick a Muslim president from the southern part of the country. And then when they came to this part of the country, the northern part, it was a problem to pick a Christian candidate. It had to be a Muslim candidate. So it produced the Muslim presidency. The Christian Association of Nigeria revolted against it. A lot of politicians in the party left the party because of that, especially with the kinds of utterances saying what happened in Kaduna State would be replicated at the national level. So that basically gave an idea of what we all feared, the concept of Islamization. But usually it comes in a soft form. The way they say they kill a frog by just adjusting the heat of the water to whatever he finds comfortable. But they said, no, that wasn't it. That wasn't it. It had nothing to do. It was a matter of competence. Once he got into power, of course.
So you're telling me, well, not you, but so the party is basically saying they couldn't find a single competent Christian candidate, because
that's right.
What it seems is because I used to be a politician for 7 years. I was in politics for 10 years, and for example, in Canadian politics, we have something called constitutional conventions. So a constitutional convention is basically something. It's not a law that's like a written law, but it's a part of how government runs, and it's just like an unwritten rule that everyone follows. So it seems like what you're saying is that in Nigeria there was this convention, this parliamentary convention, political convention, where if you have the leader is of one religion, then you have the vice president of the other religion in order to balance it out, and then this party just basically decided to ignore that convention entirely.
Yes, and that was started in Kaduna State. Kaduna State has a similar representation with Nigeria, where you have, arguably the same proportion of Christian, the same ratio of Christian to Muslims. But when the governor came in, Nasiru El-Rufai, he got into power with a Christian deputy. And primarily, a lot of us understand that he would not even have won that election if not for that Christian deputy because of his political pedigree. But after his first tenure, he was able to enforce the Muslim presidency, even though it didn't win in terms of a popular vote. But because the president at the time was a Muslim, and he was a Muslim, and Kaduna State was a sort of a hotbed where it looked as if we need to assert our dominance. So there were lots of rigging and all of that. And then the Muslim governorship passed, which was celebrated as governor Muslim, deputy Muslim, all the key players Muslims. So once that passed, some of us actually knew that if this has happened in Kaduna State, the next point would be the national level. And frankly speaking, once the presidential elections came for 2023, we saw it. And then one way or the other, by whatever means necessary, the presidency emerged, and then we got the Muslim presidency. So any analyst, whether locally and internationally, that followed the trend will most likely describe the presidency in Nigeria or the current regime as an Islamic regime, basically speaking. That basically, I believe, is where his understanding is coming from, and he's not wrong to analyze it that way.
Wow. So I want to play a video. This is a powerful video. It's making the rounds. And then I want to get your thoughts on, of course, what we're seeing here, which is absolutely horrific, but also like next steps.
We are tired to be outside performing burial every day, and they expect us to silence. Now it's an order. Nigerian government came out openly and denied there is no massacre, there is no genocide of Christians in Nigeria, and look at it today. Is there any Muslim here? No. United Nations, I know you're watching me. American Senate, you are watching what I'm doing, I'm saying here. special advisor to Trump. Now, please tell Trump to save our life in Nigeria. They are killing Christians in Nigeria, massacre Christians. If they say they kill Muslims, Muslims are being killed. By who? By Muslims.
That's a very, very powerful video. And, you know, as an Iranian, it really resonates to me. And I can tell you it resonates with a lot of Iranians because I don't want to call it the government because it's like it's an Islamic dictatorship that's occupying Iran, but the terrorists occupying our country have been murdering us for 47 years as well in the name of, you know, like Allah and Islam and all of that. And, you know, we also have horrific stories of, you know, mass graves and children being murdered and, you know, rape and all of that. It's horrific. So I see this and it resonates deeply with me, and it resonates deeply with the Iranian community because we've all been victims of Islamic terrorism. What can we do? So here he is saying, President Trump, help us. So what is the ask here? What is it that we who are, you know, not Nigerian, not in Nigeria, what can we do? And what can President Trump do, ideally, to stop the Christian genocide in Nigeria?
Yeah, you know, prior to the coming of Joe Biden, under Trump's first tenure, Nigeria was on the CPC list, and scientific.
Could you explain that? So what is the CPC list? What does that do?
Country of particular concern, country that basically have been, you know, watched to have a form of persecution against whatever they would term as Christian minority, either by virtue of their list presence in the, you know, government and all of that. So Nigeria was on that.
What will it do? So when Nigeria was on the CPC list, how did that help?
Now, once on that CPC list, one of the things that happens is that there is control in terms of military aid. There would be a couple of sanctions, and then there would be pressure internationally, which in the case of Nigeria did indicate a decrease in such attacks. Especially targeted attacks on Christians. But like I said, it was in Trump's, first tenure. Once he left and Biden came in, one way or the other, Nigeria left that list. And like I said, scientifically also, there was an increase in such forms of attacks. And then completely, the idea of massacre of Christians, targeted killings, basically went silent. I remember well, somewhere around, I think the first quarter of 2023, so or 2022, 2023, late 2022, early 2023, I was at the UN for a different reason actually. But then I was at the office of the, resident coordinator, and I asked him, I said, are you aware of the massacres in the Middle Belt? And he said, well, a lady around said, you mean the farmer had a clash? I said, no. It's not farmer had a clash. It's a targeted killing of Christians, sacking of communities and all of that. But I was taken to another office where I had a conversation with another officer who basically introduced me. That was the first time I heard of climate change induced crisis. So a clear case of a genocide.
Such a bogus term, really.
Yeah, a clear case of genocide basically got coined into something, intellectual. Farmer had a clash, climate change induced crisis. And basically that was the best response you could ever get. It didn't matter how many people got killed. So being off the CPC list made it possible for certain things to just thrive without any pressure internationally. Locally, there was a higher tendency of getting arrested if you kept insisting the killings were targeted. So what we are hoping is that if we are put back on that list, it would basically, bring some sensitivity to the antenna of international organizations, the international community, to begin to focus what exactly is happening. Are the Christians just lying? Is the government covering something up, and all of that? So yes, so that would basically, so one of the things it will affect is military aid. And the next thing is that based on what Senator Ted Cruz said, it will target government officials who have links to these atrocities, either by sponsoring it, either by using their power to suppress the media so that the world doesn't know what's happening and all of that. And I think primarily the denial of this genocide is strictly because these officials do not want to be brought to book. So it's most likely that the people linked to these terrorist activities, either through which funding comes in or through which the political ground is prepared for them to thrive or whatsoever, understand well they will be brought to book. And by all means necessary, they want to deny the genocide. So the CPC, being back to the CPC list, will basically put pressure on Nigeria. And I think the whole idea is that people are tired of dying. We're tired, just like the pastor said, we are tired of burying people. 18, 100, 400, 150, and all of that. And the government keeps denying the figures, but they keep happening every now and then. You find communities that totally, there are people that for the past 12 years have been in IDP camps, have not gone back home. Some houses are overgrown with grasses and all of that. So what we want is to just live our lives peacefully and thrive and be of use to humanity. And that's all. And I think being on that list would basically put some pressure on Nigeria, especially the few officials that may not be muddled up into it will basically wake up to their responsibility. That basically is what I would hope to see.
So, we've seen some posts by Ted Cruz, who is really starting to raise awareness about the Christian genocide in Nigeria. And, so he's retweeting. And of course, we saw that Islamist paper, Al Jazeera. I've spoken about Al Jazeera before. Al Jazeera is basically an Islamist mouthpiece for Qatar and the Muslim Brotherhood. So right. Al Jazeera for the last 2 years have been speaking about the fake genocide in Gaza because, of course, they are Hamas propagandists, and Hamas is a branch of the Muslim Brotherhood. And, interestingly enough, Al Jazeera is actually banned in countries like Saudi Arabia, the UAE, Egypt.
Oh, wow.
Yeah, Egypt, Bahrain, and Jordan. So all these Arab Muslim countries have banned Al Jazeera because they recognize that it is an Islamist jihadi propaganda piece for Qatar. And yet it operates freely in the West, operates freely in Western countries. And because they have, because they are taking advantage of the freedom of expression in Western countries, then they publish articles like this, there's no Christian genocide in Gaza. So how is it that, Al Jazeera can go on and on for 2 years about the fake genocide in Gaza, which is just, jihadi propaganda, and the numbers speak for themselves. But when there's an actual Christian genocide happening in Nigeria, Al Jazeera wants to deny it because ultimately it's their side. It's their side that's doing the killings. And this this narrative doesn't fit into the Muslims are the oppressed narrative that they try to push on the West, right? So you have all these Islamist groups that are trying to deny what's happening. But what's interesting is that Ted Cruz is starting to tweet about this. So Ted Cruz, at the very least, is very aware. Now, he's not the Secretary of State, but how do you see this going? Where do you see this going? And does this mean, in your opinion, that perhaps Marco Rubio is going to be closer to designating Nigeria as a country of particular concern?
Yeah, I actually hope so. I think it would happen. I actually hope it does, frankly speaking. And this is me talking to you as a Christian from the Middle Belt, as a man who has seen a whole lot that has traumatized our hearts. Now, the global jihadists have metamorphosed. Speaking about Al Jazeera, have metamorphosed. If you realize there have been, over the years, there have been less suicide bombings in that regard, but there's been something more strategic, slightly different. They have become far more sophisticated in terms of their propaganda. Okay, they have become far more sophisticated in penetrating the Western world. Whereas from Nigeria, I would need to do a whole lot to get into the UK, to come to the US, but somebody could just leave the Middle East and he just finds his way to Europe, he comes in as a refugee and all of that. And they have a very perfect understanding of the laws in the West, the freedoms in the West and all of that. So whereas in places like Nigeria, Islamist fighters are armed to basically wipe out communities. In the West, they might not have evolved into wiping out communities, but there is the idea of your own rules, your own freedoms being the weapons. So I just sneak in with many people as could come in, begin to do a whole lot of things. Sometimes when I see them burning tires, burning flags, doing all kinds of things, blocking roads on behalf of Hamas in the West, I usually ask myself if actually they were back home, wherever they came from in the Middle East, and one of the officials in those Islamist regimes raped their wives, they wouldn't even have the right to protest against it openly. But they found themselves in countries that have welcomed them, and they do all of these things. So over the years, they've penetrated key organizations. For instance, who would have ever thought that the United Nations would appear, even in the faintest sense, sympathetic to the cause of Hamas? But I mean, here we are. Who would have thought that the United Nations, through all of what is happening in Nigeria, would still be silent until date? Have you ever had any strong statement from the United Nations with regards to what's been happening on Nigeria? It has never happened.
No.
What's going on? The Deputy Secretary General of the United Nations is Nigerian. But go through her, Amina Mohammed, go through her Twitter page. She has never, ever made any comment with regards to the massacres in Nigeria's Middle Belt at all.
And I'm telling you, they never will, because the United Nations right now is one of the most corrupt organizations in the world. They are basically taken over by the Islamists and by the communists. And the United Nations, they never speak out for Iranian people. They never speak out when Iranian people are being murdered by the Islamists. They never speak for Nigerians, anyone, right? It's always just like, you know, Gaza, 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 right? The fake genocide in Gaza. Because it's
actually, Gaza is the cover. Hamas is basically what they want. It's not the people of Gaza. It's not the people of
exactly,
Palestine.
exactly.
It's that terrorist organization they want. And to just say something about Ted Cruz's position and his understanding of what Al Jazeera is doing gives me hope that it will be difficult for Al Jazeera to capitalize on the freedom it enjoys in the West to spread propaganda. It will be difficult for it to capitalize on that to suppress the genocide happening in Nigeria. So likely we would be on that list, not for the fact that we want the pressure of, you know, a lot of things, but the fact that it would awaken people who are saddled with the responsibility of bringing to book the fighters and their sponsors. And likely we will see an end to this.
Well, you know, I can say that we're all praying. We're all praying for you. We're praying for Nigeria. We're praying for all Nigerians, Nigerian Christians, Nigerian Muslims, everyone. But especially the victims of this genocide that's happening. And we're going to continue to raise awareness about this. If there's anything that we can do to put pressure on the American government to put Nigeria on the CPC list, let us know. If there's like a global petition or something, you know, we can sign it, share it, let us know, because if that's the way to best help the Nigerian people, then let's do it, because it also seems like something very easy. It's not going to cost any money. So, you know, it's not like Nigerians are asking for money. You're not asking for boots on the ground, nothing. You're just asking for putting Nigeria on the CPC list. And it seems as if when the Biden administration removed Nigeria from the CPC list, that was another terrible foreign policy decision that the Biden administration made. You know, they made terrible foreign policy decisions with respect to the Islamic Republic occupying Iran, where it seems like whenever the Democrats come in, they try to normalize relations with the Islamist governments. Yeah, see, I'm telling you,
I know that. I know John Kerry prior to the elections came in and he went straight to the Sultan, which didn't really make sense to many people. Visited him. I know Obama's statements that looked as if, hey, we need to get you out and get this man in and all that. So we saw how, the president that was, we called it a regime change, you know, Goodluck Ebele Jonathan. He did mention how clearly he saw, you know, the complicity of, you know, the Democrats in, you know, that regime change. And basically what did we get in turn? The proliferation of terrorist group, genocide and all of that. Removal of Nigeria from the CPC list basically boosted the activities of Islamists in the country.
Do you know who who lobbied for that? Because I would be very interested to know which group or association or organization lobbied the Biden administration to remove Nigeria from the CPC list. I have a feeling it would have something to do with some of the Islamist groups that are already there, because the Biden administration, they wouldn't wake up one day and say, today I feel like removing Nigeria from the seat. Like someone would have had to
Yep. I'm sure the terrorists locally got to a point, basically the Islamists in Nigeria keyed into the global jihad movement. Let me just use that word.
Right.
So because that has already been a matured structure with people lobbying in the West, Western part, in Europe, in the EU, in the UK, in the US, where you have, I don't know if she's your friend, Ilhan Mohammed, such kinds of individuals in the parliament in the US, escaping terrorism, ending up in the US, and then having problem with US policies against terrorism, things that don't really add up. So I think locally, just the way the terrorist groups like Boko Haram, the splinter groups that broke up from Boko Haram, pledged allegiance to ISIS, I believe that Islamists, even in politics and all of that, equally found a way of keying into, the global jihadist movement. So basically getting to lobby, whether in the US or whatsoever, to get the country off the list, or maybe to get organizations like Al Jazeera to also lend their voice in suppressing the genocide will no longer be difficult, because
Al Jazeera is not going to do that. Al Jazeera would not do that, because that's totally counter to their narrative. Well, thank you so much for following. For joining. Let me just do one more thing before I let you go.
All right.
I want to find your X account, and then let me put it up here on the stage so that people can see it and make sure that they're following you. So if you want the latest on the Nigerian genocide, make sure that you are following Zariyi. And here we go. Let me just go to your profile.
All right.
Here we go. There we go. Anyways, thank you so much for joining. Praying for you. I appreciate you giving us an hour of your time. And anything I can do, you know how to get a hold of me.
Yeah, that's right. Thank you so much, Goldie. You're doing great so far, and then I'm sure we would still find more grounds to work for the common good of humanity. Thank you so much for this platform.
Thank you. And anytime you want to come on, let me know. Send me a message,
Right.
and you're more than happy to come on and speak. But I do appreciate that. Thank you so much for your time.
Thank you so much, Goldie. God bless you. Yeah.
Thank you so much. You as well. Okay, so that was Zariyi. If you're not following him, make sure that you are. That is his Twitter account right there. And if you didn't catch our interview from the beginning, make sure that you go back and watch it from the beginning, because he kind of goes through, he explains everything. And I could speak to him for hours, but I do know that he has other obligations as well, and so hopefully we'll be able to have him back on soon to give us more updates. So I just wanted to now go through some of the videos and footage, some more videos and footage from the Nigerian genocide here, because it's just the things that are coming out are really horrific, and it's very frustrating that this is being denied. It's being denied by the Nigerian government. It's being denied by Islamists. It's being denied by the jihadists. It's being denied by jihadi propaganda outlets like Al Jazeera, and who is actually speaking up and raising awareness about this. And, I kind of alluded to this yesterday. I spoke about this yesterday, but I'll bring it up again. So here's a map of Islamic colonization, areas that were under Muslim rule at one point or another. So it's not as big anymore, because obviously, Spain was able to fight back and de-Islamize themselves. I mean, Spain was Al-Andalus at a point, and of course, India, right? Like India used to be all India here used to be all under Muslim control until they fought back and reclaimed their country from the Muslim invaders. But here, if you look at Nigeria, so Nigeria is right here. This border is pretty accurate. Okay, this is, so keep in mind, this is the boundary of Muslim rule. Okay, there's Nigeria, and you can see it's kind of in half. And here is the current religious divide in Nigeria, right? So it's coming, starting from the north, moving slowly towards the south. So it's that same expansionist pattern. And it is very scary to see that this expansionist pattern and expansionist behavior is being ignored by the jihadis. And let me tell you something, as an Iranian who, has gone through, whose family and friends and the entire Iranian population have gone through this Islamic expansionist behavior, this is what it looks like. What do you think happened in Lebanon 50 years ago? Lebanon 50 years ago used to be a Muslim majority country. Sorry, I'm getting a all right. Sorry, guys. So just a little bit of a heads up. As soon as this stream is done, I am going to start restreaming again a different episode, because I'm going to be joining Armin on Atheist Republic. So for those of you who follow Atheist Republic, you can catch me there. But those of you who don't follow Atheist Republic, stay tuned here, because when this live is done, I'm going to restart a different live, and we're going to talk about something else. But I was just checking those messages there. But where was I? Yes. So Lebanon, okay, 50 years ago, Lebanon used to be a Christian majority country, and now it is no longer a Christian majority country. In fact, Lebanon was invaded by Islamists. It was invaded by Palestinian terrorists and Hezbollah terrorists. And Lebanon, even though in the 70s used to be a beautiful country, used to be called the Paris, Beirut was the Paris of the Middle East. It is now basically a country that's been torn by civil war, and southern Lebanon is basically Hezbollah infested country, right? All the Islamists, all the jihadis, and there was a huge civil war. Palestinians invaded, murdered all the Lebanese as well. So, if you ever want to learn about how Islamic expansion and Islamic colonization works, if you want modern day examples, speak to Iranians, because we've been through it. Speak to Lebanese people, and actual Lebanese people, not the Hezbollah ones who support Islamic terrorism, right? Those don't count because they are the oppressors, obviously. And of course, speak to Nigerian Christians, because Nigerian Christians are going through that. And like Zariyi said, they just want to live their lives. They just want to live their lives in peace, the way that they have always done, and they just don't want to be murdered. So let me share a few more videos with you, and then I'll end it off. But I think the most important and key takeaway here is that we should all be working to raise awareness about putting Nigeria back on the CPC list, which is the countries of particular concern list, because when Nigeria goes back on that list, more eyes will be on the country, and that will provide additional safety to Nigerian Christians. Not guaranteed safety, but additional safety. And so that is something that all of us can do to put pressure on the US government, raise awareness about that. It doesn't require money. It doesn't require funds. It doesn't require boots on the ground. It doesn't require taxpayer dollars. It's just a designation, but that designation can go a very long way. And so it kind of seems to me, guys, now that I think about it, the fact that you have these, Islamic jihadi propaganda outlets like Al Jazeera, right? Let me pull this up again. So the fact that you have, gotta remove this first. Okay. So the fact that you have, like jihadi propaganda outlets like Al Jazeera saying there's no Christian genocide in Nigeria, it kind of seems to me that the reason Al Jazeera and other Islamists are denying the fact or trying to deny the fact that that Christians aren't being massacred in Nigeria is because they don't want Nigeria to be put back on the CPC list. They do not want Nigeria to be on the countries of particular concern list. They don't want the world to be looking at the Islamic invasion in Nigeria. They don't want the world to know that Christians are literally being genocided, right? So they are going to fight tooth and nail, and this is how they do it. And that's why it is so surprising to me that anyone who speaks out about Christians being massacred in Nigeria, they all of a sudden get so much pushback, right? So much pushback. Very similar. It's very similar to how we as Iranians get a lot of pushback and attacks when we speak about, the Islamic Republic occupying us, and very similar to how Jewish people are attacked constantly, right? It's almost like it's all coming from the same ideology. Sorry, guys, I have a bit of a cold. It almost seems like it's coming from the same source, right? Because when you trace the root cause of all of these problems, right? The problem in Iran with the Islamic Republic, the problem in Nigeria with the Islamists, and now the Islamist government, the problem in Israel with, Hamas and the Muslim Brotherhood. It all goes back to the same thing, which is Islamic terrorism and jihad, right? That global jihad that is impacting various people in various parts of the world. So I think the most important thing we can do is to raise awareness about what's happening in Nigeria and understand that international global linkage, right? Because what's happening in Nigeria is not isolated. And yesterday I showed you how Nigeria is, the Islamic Republic of Iran is connected to Nigeria, right? I showed you. Wait, I had it here somewhere. I can't find it now. Oh yeah, here we go. So I showed you yesterday how, look at these Nigerian youth, right? Or like, I guess they're not really youth, they're men. Look at, like, what are Nigerian men doing in Iran, right? Talking about pro-Palestine. Like, what is the connection there? Why is it even related, right? This is the global jihad link, right? Why are these Nigerian Muslims holding, like, I don't know who that guy is. He's probably oh gosh, Zariyi would know. You know what, Zariyi, if you're available, maybe I'll bring you back on if you're available. Okay, all right. I thought you had to go, but if you're here, I'm happy to keep you as long as I can.
I just chose to hang around and.
I appreciate that so much. So who is that? Who's that guy?
Well, we do have a sect that the Shiites.
Yeah.
So I think it would have to be the Ayatollah also. So basically.
Yeah, the Shiites. The Shiites are very, very dangerous. Like, I would say, the Shiites are just as dangerous as the Sunnis. Like, they're all basically jihadi. And like this guy here, this Ayatollah. So this is the founder of the Islamic Republic here, right? We hate him. He's responsible for turning Iran into the 7th century Islamic hellhole that it is today. So the fact that like these Nigerian Shias are being brought to occupied Iran by the Islamic Republic, and they're literally holding images of our oppressors, right? The oppressors of Iranian people. It just goes to show this international linkage when it comes to Islamic terrorism and global jihad, because no normal regular Nigerian person would probably even know who that person is, let alone like hold a sign of him, right? It does not happen unless there is some sort of linkage there. So
that's right.
yeah, so this is how far the Islamists go, and this is how far they've unfortunately infiltrated Nigeria and are continuing to infiltrate Nigeria. And so, I'll end it here with my final thoughts, and I want to thank everyone for joining, and of course, Zariyi, you as well. But I personally, I've said this before, but I'll say it again: unless and until the Islamic Republic occupying Iran is overthrown, we're going to continue to see this Islamic expansionist mindset, because one of the core foundational pillars of the Islamic Republic that's occupying my country of Iran is international jihad, is creating this global caliphate. And so that's why we're seeing this violence in Nigeria right now. It's linked to all of that. And so, our fight is your fight. We're all fighting the same evil. And this is why I speak out, not just against the Islamic Republic occupying Iran, but part of what I want to do is speak about other areas, other places where Islamic terrorism is happening, because it's all linked. It's all linked together if you know where to look. So, again, thank you, Zariyi, for joining. Thank you, everyone, for joining as well. And let's see what we can do to put Nigeria on the countries of particular concern list. Great. Thank you, everyone. Bye.